Hey, everybody, it's Robert Weissman, co president of Public Citizen, with another issue of Informed Resistance. Thanks for joining us. We are super excited today to be joined by my friend Deirdre Schifeling. She's a title that I was just saying to her, I cannot remember, so I'm going to read. She's the ACLU's Chief Political and Advocacy Officer and leads their National Political Advocacy Department. Welcome to the conversation, Deirdre.
Thank you so much for having me.
When we booked this, we did not have in mind that the Supreme Court would have handed down a horrific decision on voting rights the day before, but it has. So we'll dive into that. I think we'll try to talk about other really hot issues that the ACLU is leading on, including FISA. Maybe take a broad view of what's going on with the Trump administration and civil liberties and what it means to live under an authoritarian regime, and how importance of our rights and freedoms. And then we'll wind up and we will cover all that in 30 minutes or less. All right. So let's jump in. Maybe I'm sure people have read about this decision, the Callais decision, but actually understanding it is not necessarily so easy. So could you walk us through what the Supreme Court did yesterday?
Yeah, the Supreme Court basically eviscerated the remaining parts of the Voting Rights Act, in particular, Section 2. Justice Kagan said in her dissent, today's decision renders Section 2 all but a dead letter in the vast majority of cases. And what that means is that there are no longer protections against racial gerrymandering. And so it really dilutes the protections that were put in place to allow equal representation across the country as one of the legacies of the civil rights movement. And we've already seen Louisiana just today, the governor say that he is going to suspend the primary elections in Louisiana in reaction to this decision. So the impact is already being felt in a very real way on the kind of choices that voters will get. There's already chatter in Tennessee about trying to get rid of the single remaining, Democratic district in all of Tennessee, trying to gerrymander that out of existence. And what this really does is prevents communities of color from electing representatives of their choice. And it's a travesty. And I think the solution to it is to pass federal legislation at the first opportunity to put in place even stronger protections that guarantee equal representation.
So when you're talking about racial gerrymandering, you're talking about carving up districts in ways that are designed to disempower voters of color. And of course, the majority said that they were precisely going to block that from happening. So you say that they're doing the opposite. I agree with you, obviously. What do they actually do if they're saying, hey, no, racial gerrymandering is illegal? Why do you say no? Actually, they're inviting it and enabling it?
In an equal society, in an equal democracy, we would have communities of interest. We would have districts that represent communities of people who have a shared interest, a shared geographic interest, a shared background, who can actually elect representatives who represent them. What we have instead is an extremely gerrymandered system that is carved up to be purely to basically achieve purely partisan ends. And so you have these districts that are really dividing communities, dividing different racial and ethnic communities and dividing geographic communities in ways that don't make sense. One of the legacies of the civil rights movement is protecting, especially historically disenfranchised communities, in particular Black communities, from being divided up in this way where they won't have the opportunity to ever elect somebody who really represents them. And that was historically true up until we had the Voting Rights Act. And so this really goes back to that time. This really goes back to that time of being able to gerrymander districts along partisan lines, and create like much more majority white, and in many cases majority Republican districts than we had before. And so that's how you get a situation where you can have communities so unrepresented at the state and congressional level, both racially but also along partisan lines. Tennessee is a great example of that. Like the number of Democrats in Tennessee versus the number of Democrats that they can actually send to Congress, there's a wide schism between those two things.
Right. And the court has said in a bunch of recent decisions, that's fine if it's done for partisan reasons. Like the party in power can carve up the districts however they want to advance their own interests. That's fine. It's not okay to do it for racist purposes, or more clearly with racist intent. But so long as you say it's for partisan purposes, it's fine. And of course, the reality is that the partisan interests and the racist intent are intertwined. And
Right.
unless you're incredibly stupid and announce that you're doing it for the reason the Supreme Court said you can't, instead of using the magic words that they say you can use, you can go ahead and do exactly what you want to do.
Right. These things track.
And then the idea is like, no, our society, we can't take race into account for a positive purpose. What's unsaid is that, of course, they're taking race into account,
right,
for the purpose of suppressing people's rights or denying communities of color democratic representation.
Right. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
It's extraordinary.
It is extraordinary. And my hope is that, yeah, go ahead.
No, you're about to go there because people are, what can we do? And you already touched on it, but I just want to not leave people with a sense of hopelessness, because this is a really bad decision that the Supreme Court is not going to overturn in the next 2 or 3 years. So what can we do?
Yeah. So what we can do is we can vote in massive and overwhelming numbers. We can vote for pro-democracy candidates. We can elect a pro-democracy Congress and Senate, and we can pass pro-democracy legislation like the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, like many, many additional democracy reforms that we need to rehabilitate our democratic structure of governments. And I say democratic small d. I mean, I think the silver lining here of this catastrophic decision is I think it really lays bare, couldn't be more clear how dysfunctional our current system of government is, and how deep the need for reform is. And I hope that it will really awaken people to the need for a whole different approach to our system of governance and make more transformational reform possible.
Yeah, I mean, this Louisiana situation, it's not the most number of seats, but it is so extraordinary, and it's exactly what you're saying. Like, no one feels like they need to pretend anything right now. It's like they were constrained by the law. The election is moving forward. The Supreme Court says you're no longer constrained by the law. They're like, okay, we're going to change the rules for the election in the middle. We're going to call it, it's an emergency. We need to call an emergency session to rig the rules in ways we're now allowed to do. And so it is what it is.
Right. Yeah,
no one's pretending anything else.
No one's pretending anything else. And I think we've all witnessed this farce of, mid-decade redistricting, mid-decade gerrymandering, kind of a race to the bottom, that states have been, spurred by President Trump's demand that they do this. States have been involved in. And so that too is really disenfranchising voters, taking their voice away, taking their choices away in terms of representation. They don't have representation when they have gerrymandering. And so that's now spread to many, many states. And it's really become kind of like an epidemic.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point that's appreciated, I think, in the last day of commentary, because there properly is so much focus on what the decision said and the racist implications of it.
Yeah.
But the excuse that partisan gerrymandering is fine. Like, partisan gerrymandering is just a way to disenfranchise people, period. And it's not a good thing that every state feels they have to sort of rush to their corner. It's like,
That's right.
I'm not blaming any Democratic state for sure that did it in response, but it's not a great thing for the voters in that state either.
Right.
And so the solution to say, or the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and strengthening voting rights, and then legislation to deal with gerrymandering nationally.
That's
So
right.
we have fair districts
Across the country
and
that are enforced.
an even playing field everywhere.
Yes. And judicial reform, which I see in the chat, is coming up. Yeah. Which I think, it's hard to argue with.
Okay, well, the ACLU is in a bunch of like super hot fights for this week. That was one. Another is FISA reauthorization. Okay, let's start with that. Just even what is that? What am I talking about with FISA reauthorization?
I mean, FISA reauthorization is really about a law that allows a level of surveillance of the American people, which we believe is wrong and unconstitutional and shouldn't be allowed. And this is one of the few areas where the ACLU has often worked very closely with very right-wing Republicans who also agree, sort of libertarian type Republicans who also agree that the government should not have this very far-reaching kind of ability to surveil American citizens. And this came out of like the war on terror. That's where it originated from. And has never been, that kind of surveillance capacity has never really been put back in the box. So we were hopeful that that FISA would not be reauthorized and that this surveillance would be curtailed. And that does not appear to be the direction that we are going in, unfortunately. And it's another reminder that we need strong guardrails on the protections of rights and liberties in a democracy, and the protections against the overreach of the government into our personal affairs and personal beliefs. And we've seen a tremendous overreaching by this administration in lots of ways into people's, social media monitoring and, kind of weaponizing things like TSA and, passport control against people who are speaking out against the administration. And this is just like one example of the kind of overreach that this kind of surveillance allows. That we don't want in a democratic and a free society where, everybody's entitled to freedom of speech. Everybody's entitled to peaceful protest. These are core rights and liberties that we have to protect.
Yes, as you say, this is post 9/11 when the country kind of overreacted in a typical way. It's 25 years ago. Kind of hope we could sort of reorient, and it may be almost it's as you say, like there are Republicans who agree, so it felt like maybe we were going to have a moment. I think what wasn't obvious, at least it wasn't obvious to me, was that this second round of the Trump administration would lean so heavily not just into sort of weaponizing government, but into surveillance and into data and into knocking down, in this really aggressive way, all these protections that had existed for government control of data, whether it's this external surveillance or the internal mixing and sharing of data sets that had always been separated. And I don't know if that's the influence of these sort of the right-wing tech people in there, or if it's Russell vote or whatever, but it's very consistent and ominous. It really is a lot of the kind of 1984 dystopian stuff in a much more aggressive way than we've seen even during, the Iraq War. This seems like a whole new era we're entering.
That's right. And it's quite typical of authoritarian regimes to go down this road of making citizens understand that the government has a lot of information about you, and the government can use that information to punish you if you speak out against it. mean, that is very typical authoritarian behavior, and we're seeing quite an escalation under President Trump and his regime of this kind of behavior, which is very, very worrisome. So, yeah, I think we have a lot to fix about how our democracy operates.
If I could, let me ask you to go into the weeds for a second in terms of what's going on the Hill. Like, how is FISA playing out? What kind of things are you advocating for? What are the prospects for any reform? I know it's very fluid as we're speaking. It'll probably be different by the time we finish this conversation than it was when we started.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
where do you think things going? And is there any hope at this, in this round?
I mean, we had 45 Democrats voting for this, which I don't understand. So we are right now getting to the bottom of this. So I'm not sure I can give you like a super, super informed view because I had the same conversation with our team this morning. Like, what is happening here? How can this many Democrats be voting for this? What's the work that we need to do to try to
be
help
clear,
them
actually, I'm
understand?
not clear. Let me interrupt you for a second, just because I need straight. So this is you're saying this is like a clean, with no reform reauthorization on the House side,
Right. Yes.
and we got
Yeah.
the 45 Dems who are bad, and then it's going to go to the Senate. But the Senate's not going. It appears not poised to agree to that. Is that right?
That this is where I'm not totally clear. So yeah, I'm not totally clear on like why are we at this position that we're in right now with the House, and what is it is very fluid. What is the path in the Senate? And so this is where I'm going to have to come back to you because I'm not totally I was quite surprised by the
Yeah.
level of support in the House, and I'm not sure why this is where we are right now, to be honest. But we have our lobbyists on the Hill right now trying to figure this out and trying to change the math.
Yeah, it's so confounding. I mean, it's horrific, but you can imagine why there are Dems who just sort of believe in some, national security, blah, 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 rationale for this
Yeah,
in general, but not with the Trump administration when you know what they're doing
right,
and you see how aggressive they've been in clamping down on immigrant communities, clamping down on dissidents, clamping down on
right,
anybody they define as an enemy. It's
right.
hard to
And
wrap your head around. There could be
I think that's
real
right. And
defections.
typically, there do not, Democrats are afraid of being accused of being soft on national security or soft on terror. But I think you're totally right. We are in a new world. We're in a different dynamic, and it's the opposite problem of overreach and abuse. And so, yes, I don't understand why any Democrat honestly would vote for that in this moment in time.
Yeah, in a totally different world, which you may or may not be familiar with, like the crypto industry has sort of bought their way massive influence in Congress, and suddenly Democrats are supporting what crypto wants, which they were opposing as they should because it's a Ponzi scheme industry designed to steal from people. But that they bought their way to having lots of Democratic support. But as Trump himself personally capitalized on the industry, Democrats who want to go along with industry said, "Oh, we can't let that happen. Like this president, we have to check." You'd think on something that's
Yeah,
orders of magnitude more important. Crypto is super important, but even more important,
yeah,
you think the Dems would be there. Very
yeah,
disappointing.
yeah. It's very disappointing.
Well, I wanted to then pull back and just get your reflections, besides the things we've just been talking about, which are very alive right now. We had the Justice Department this week criminally charged the former FBI director over a seashell Instagram photo. We had, I think it's last week, I can't even keep track. The Justice Department criminally charged one of our allies, friendly organizations, SPLC, that exist to take down the Klan. They charge them with funding the Ku Klux Klan
Right,
as a criminal matter.
right.
Um,
Sort of like an
and we've seen
onion.
we see the chair of the FCC going after ABC because Jimmy Kimmel made a joke that some of us think were funny. And so I didn't think it was that funny, but
Yeah,
whatever. It was definitely not a threat to anybody.
right.
So if you sort of reflect on all this, okay, you're at the ACLU. What does it tell us? And like, what is it? And what's, where are we and where do we need to go? It's a little
Yeah,
amorphous question, but go for it.
yeah. Okay, I'll give it my best shot. I mean, I think where we are is in descent a rapid descent further into authoritarianism. I mean, these are the behaviors of an authoritarian government. To crack down on freedom of speech, to crack down on anyone who's a critic, to make an example of an organization that is venerated, like the Southern Poverty Law Center. If they can come for the Southern Poverty Law Center, they can come for any one of our organizations in civil society. And I think that's kind of the message. Similarly to what we saw this regime do with law firms and with universities, where you target one and you try to bring that one to heel, and then you see if the other ones will fold. I mean, I think this regime is testing its limits on freedom of speech, testing its limits on civil society. Can they bully enough organizations into silence or into stopping doing their work? So, I mean, to me, it's like very familiar territory of what we've seen this administration do so far.
Yeah.
And what we need to do is fight back full-throatedly and not give one single inch. And so at the ACLU, we are, focused on kind of 3 areas of work broadly. We're focused on what we call the 3 Ds. This may be, familiar to some. The first is delay, dilute, defeat. So we are like delaying, diluting, defeating these kinds of actions of the administration. We've had over 250 legal actions against this administration, lawsuits since Trump was inaugurated. We have won 85% of that. So that is like a little known fact that, despite the hideous actions of the Supreme Court, the lower courts are holding. The lower courts are largely following the law. And we are winning at the lower court most of the time. We are also working to delegitimize. That's the second D, delegitimize, so that when the administration does something like this, where they try to make an example out of Jimmy Kimmel, it backfires and they look illegitimate for attacking freedom of speech. Or they try to make an example out of the Southern Poverty Law Center, it backfires. And they look weaker and they look preposterous. I think a lot of the threats, we recently got out of the field with some polling on threats to the election. And I was interested to learn the vast majority of the public believes that the biggest threat to our elections is from the federal government, is from the federal government meddling with results, not respecting results, doing something to change the results. They are not worried about all of these, supposed threats that the administration has been talking about, whether it's undocumented immigrants voting, not on voters' radar, or people voting twice, voter fraud. This is not what the American people are worried about. They are worried about the federal government meddling with our elections. So I think this delegitimizing is working. It's, people do not believe what the president is saying. And then the third is really recruiting defectors and really trying to find people across the board who will defect and disavow this administration. And so I think part of that is, working with folks in the Freedom Caucus on not reauthorizing FISA. Part of that is finding, Republican state legislators in Florida who will speak up against the gerrymandering that Governor DeSantis is trying to drive. So wherever we can find those unlikely sources or those dissident voices on the right, we want to bring them into the fold and really amplify them. And then finally, our fourth one is really driving alternatives. And so finding ways to paint a picture of the world we should have, the democracy we should have, the kind of, government that we should have, so that we can eventually get to a place where we're able to have the kind of reforms that we deserve.
It's a lot of Ds.
It's a lot of Ds.
I thought it was going to be this. it's
It works better on
4
paper.
plus there's 3 in the first, so it's kind of 6.
I know that's true.
It's
You're right.
tricky.
Really
There's
4 of them.
subtleties.
Really 4. I'll send
Yeah,
you the memo.
but democracy, or well, driving, it was driving, right? But then the
Driving
democracy is kind of like
alternatives. Driving alternatives.
democracy is the overarching D.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. Democracy is the foundation, and it's what we fight for.
I mean, I don't know what your reaction is. My observation is that those D tactics are working.
Yeah.
And the administration is weaker because of all of our resistance, and of course, a lot of their mistakes as well.
Yeah.
But that whereas other administrations weaker would slow down, from this administration, we should expect at least that they continue as they were, and maybe that they get worse, given the sort of the personality of Trump and then the orientation of the key people around him, like Russ Vought and Stephen Miller.
Yeah. I think that's right. I mean, I think that they are already much weaker. I think $5 a gallon gas prices and a war that nobody supports or understands, tariffs that nobody supports or understands, like these kinds of massive governing failures are diminishing their support, even among their own base. That's why he's at 30% support. And the lower in support he gets, I think the more flailing around we'll see. And I view this like Southern Poverty Law, like Jimmy Kimmel, like these other things. This is like flailing around. This is like trying to change the subject. It's the action of somebody who is desperate to hold on to power. And I think we're going to see more of that. It's going to get worse before it gets better. But we should keep our eye on the prize of fair and free elections this year, fair and free elections in 28, and getting to a place where we have the kind of leadership that we deserve and the democracy reform that we deserve.
Well, that's a good place to wrap up. I want to say one thing before we do that, though, because I think rightfully we sort of mentioned the war in this last bit. I just want to acknowledge that the ACLU spoke out against the unconstitutional nature of the war. And I don't know what the history is of the organization speaking out against unconstitutional wars, but that was like a really important piece of leadership. I think it made a difference in making sure that the Democrats opposed the war, which some of them were pretty iffy on. I think in a better place now. I just really appreciate that boldness from you all on that one. And overall, let's just thank you for joining us, and it's great partnering with you and having your leadership in the space. And everybody, this has been our Informed Resistance conversation. I'm Robert Weissman, a public citizen. Thank you for joining. We will be back to talk to you again next week.
Thank you so much.